How should I facilitate a group if I'm aware of Ubuntu? Hi, I'm Louise Fouché from OTGrow. Welcome to our YouTube channel. So here we discuss tools, tips, and techniques to make you an effective group facilitator. So we're into part 4 of our Ubuntu series, and our theme for this year is the individual grows as the group gathers, and we're unpacking this theme a little bit that'll carry on throughout this year and underlie and kind of be a golden thread through a lot of things that we will be presenting this year. So welcome back, Michael. It's great to have you back. We missed you last week.
Thank you for having me back again.
All right, so today I wanted to unpack a little bit the concept of how should I be as a group facilitator? How do I really get to facilitate Ubuntu or use Ubuntu as a guideline in my facilitation? So some people will call it as a leader, a group leader, or group therapist, or how should I be? So maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Hmm. So, drawing on the work of kind of Mahmud Mamdani and kind of pre-colonial um, South Africa and what that looked like in terms of a power balance, we see that the king was never above the community, or the chief was never above the community either. And this is because the chief's power or the king's power only lies in the people that he gathers and governs. And so, if the king acts too tyrannically or too brashly, the community would leave for other lands, and the king would lose his power because he governs nothing. And I think this is a good analogy for us as therapists, as group facilitators, that when we become too tyrannical in our approaches,
Or to
become
direct, I suppose, in group
direct, too
terms.
rigid,
Controlling.
too controlling, exactly, wanting to have it go our way. What ends up happening is that the group checks out. They just kind of, you can see it in their face. They're not really interested because you have shut down their process. And so what we ideally would like to see in a group facilitated, especially within the interactive group model, is that the group is working on its own things, and you as a facilitator are just there to facilitate conflict, not avoid it, which I think is really fantastic versus other group models. So you facilitate conflict,
Yeah, there
you
is resolution of conflict. So you
the
don't stop. Yeah,
resolution,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
yeah, resolution, but the conflict itself as well. What are you trying to
Right.
say? Okay, what do you have to say to this person? So I
Yeah,
think
true.
we don't just resolve conflict, we facilitate conflict, and we allow for people to go through those processes, and in so doing, they grow as individuals, but also they are on their own journey, and we're not controlling it, we're just helping it through.
Mm.
Um, and I think this is where, as a group facilitator, we really need to be a sheepdog in a certain sense, running around the sides, but the sheep themselves go towards the kraal, as it were. And so you're not really forcing them, you're not dragging them, you're not pushing them. You're literally just on the sides, helping them along their own process.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's important to say. I think also I spoke in part 3 about this, the individual versus the group and how we hold this tension. And I think that's one of the things with the sheepdog, when we see it's just more about the group process, the individuals getting lost, and some individuals are just really going with the flow, but they're not busy with their own individual process. We can bring the group in and we can make them more aware and focus a little bit on individual processes. And when it becomes just an individual process and everybody's so focused on themselves, they've lost sight of the group and the impact they have and their decisions on the group. We can bring them in from the side again and have them become more aware of the group process. So to kind of that idea of holding both sides and allowing the group to move freely between these by making them more aware of the process.
And I think that that's exactly what Ubuntu is. You know, it is the I am because we are, and as soon as there's an imbalance between that, it is no longer Ubuntu. And
Yeah.
I think that this is what we need to come back to in a certain sense, is to be able to hold that tension. And if I may say so, I mean, this is the whole thing about occupational therapy as well. I mean, from the beginning, it's been a profession of holding extremes, you know, the individual and the group, physical and mental, artistic and scientific. And I think this is where we, well, as a profession, occupational therapists need to learn to maintain extremes, as it were, or things that are seemingly opposite.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
And I think that's important to remember because I think when I was a younger therapist, I kind of felt, you know, I'm quite impatient. I need to become patient and kind of balance them, which means coming to the middle, you know, or there's A and B, and we got to try and be at the middle. And that's not the same as holding tensions of the two. So, you know, if we say as occupational therapists, there's a scientific leg, but we also have an artistic leg. But if we threw that together, we'd get both of them would be lost. We'd have a lukewarm kind of neither nor. And that's different than to say, but we want to be artistic with everything of artists and the art elements and what that entails. But we also want to be scientific and academic and being able to hold that. And it's how do we hold both of them and not try and water it down. And I think that's the big thing that I think Ubuntu teaches us. It is about I am because we are, and both elements are important. It's not about watering them down into a lukewarm kind of mesh in the middle. It's about how do I really come to grips with the group, the we, the process, the community, the society of which I'm part, but also not to lose myself in the society, that I am still somebody who brings value, uniqueness. There's only something I alone can bring to this. And it's holding both of those.
exactly. 100%. I totally agree with you. And I think this is what kind of from a more philosophical perspective, I see we're veering off here a little bit, but what Hegel loses in his dialectics is that, you know, he goes to the one side and focuses on the thesis and the antithesis, and then the synthesis is both and yet neither. And I think this
Yeah,
is not what we are meant to do
I agree.
as occupational therapists. I agree with you that we actually need to hold both in their totality.
Yeah.
And, you know, both the individual, both the group, both the art, both the sciences. And I think this is where occupational therapy has a unique calling versus other professions.
Mm. One kind of something I want to highlight and something that I've been thinking about. So I know we talk about the sheepdog, and I know we spoke last week about the orchestra, the symphony orchestra, and I think we don't want to talk about the group facilitator being a conductor because the conductor will, okay, now you come out, now you know you come in, you're going to be highlighted, you're not, and that's not what we want to do. So in that sense, the sheepdog is quite a accurate thing. But I want to bring in the concept a little bit of Lakhotla. And for people that aren't aware of it, it was a traditional way that a king or a chief would actually deal with conflict or serious matters in a community where the men of the community were asked to come into a Lakhotla and the chief would listen to what everybody, every single person, every man in the community had to say, and then he would bring it all to a close and bring it together right at the end and make a decision. But everybody had a say at that the king listened to. And so I sometimes think that a group, a community, a country that doesn't have a strong leader that comes in at the end and makes a decision can also be detrimental. In other words, the group doesn't really know what to do with all of this. Everybody's had an opinion, but now what do we do about that? And who's right, or you know, or now the king. And so I think there's But my sense is that that's not the group facilitator. That needs to almost be the leader that emerges in the group that will take that role because it's still an important role. The group needs to make a decision. There needs to be, it doesn't help we just talk about a lot of things. There needs to be a conclusion to what, so what are we saying about all of this that we've spent 20 minutes talking about? What does that mean for this group? Um, and maybe that's a question the group facilitator can ask, but there still needs to be something from the group or somebody from the group bringing that together. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know I've just,
So, so
yeah,
I find that a fascinating concept because the thing is the Hotla and the Ndaba, both almost exactly the same mechanism. Uh, Pre-colonial times was actually above the king as well. So the king could be taken to the Hotla, or the chief, or the Nduna could be taken to the Hotla to stand in judgment by the community, and
held
I think
accountable.
held accountable. And I think this is exactly what you were saying about it has to be the group leader.
Mm,
He's not above the group.
mm,
The chief and the king is not above the group and can be held responsible by the group, and so shows that it's actually part of the group.
mm,
And so even the king, to a certain degree, is not above Ubuntu,
mm.
or the Ndaba or
Yes.
whatever. And
So,
so, yeah,
sorry, I wanted to come in, but
oh,
go
no,
carry
no,
on.
go. So what I wanted to say as well is that the Hotla was kind of a judicial system where you exactly don't want to um, have a direct arbitrator that sits in judgment, goes, yes, you and you. It was a space where, for example, two people would come together and would try and resolve their differences in front of other people and still maintain their dignity, still maintain their um, livelihood. And so, for example, if I stole a goat um, for my family to eat, but I have no livestock, the community would never allow for the person who I stole the goat from to just want a goat back because I wouldn't have stolen the goat in the first place if I could have given a goat back. And so the idea is then there's trying to bring to a mutual conclusion this issue that needs to be resolved. And if that couldn't happen in the Ndaba, in the Hotla, the community would then arbitrate on one side or the other. And so in a similar fashion, bringing it back to groups, we often see in groups as well where there's a deadlock between two of our clients, and all of a sudden you open it up to the group and you say, what does the group see? What does the group think? And
Mm,
all of a sudden the group says, well, I see Mr. Jones is like this and Mrs. Sue is like this. Um, and they might come to insight and be like, wow, I didn't realize I was so, stuck in my thoughts or whatever. And
mm,
so in a similar way, the Hotla and the Ndaba allowed for the group as a whole to then arbitrate and then come to something. But what is always underlying here is that both people walked away with their human dignity. Ubuntu was maintained, the humanness was maintained. And so I wouldn't make a slave or a servant out of someone who stole my goat because that would not allow for the human dignity. I
mm,
might have them work for me in a set period until the payment of the goat or whatever has been done. But after that point, they are still human. They're still a person. They're still part of the community. And I think this is what we try and facilitate as well in groups is to not have dehumanization, not have people um, disrespect other people
mm,
in that light, but still be able to bring up their issues, still be able to bring up their own biases and their prejudices and explore that in a safe space. I mean, we've had at some of our groups where people are very racist towards each other because that's their how they were brought up, or their mindset, their worldview, and being allowed to explore that racism, being allowed to talk to someone who is of a different culture breaks down those prejudices because they normally don't hold. They're this monolith in the mind.
Yeah.
But once you interact with a person, you can't help because that person is a human and you are a human, and no matter how hard your worldview is or how set it is, you can't help but have that human dignity remain in the group. And we've seen a lot of people break down those prejudices, break down those thoughts around racism, sexism, or whatever
Yeah.
you want in the groups.
Mm.
And I think that's what we try and do in the groups, is to allow for the space to explore those things.
Yeah, one thing that comes up for me is this concept of how great a container the group is, how this collective, this we are, is so powerful that it can allow for these discussions to happen, um, in which individuals find themselves. And I think that's what makes this process so beautiful and so aligned with Ubuntu, if we keep that in mind. So maybe
Mm.
as a closing, Michael, so let's extrapolate from that. What does that mean as a group facilitator? What should I be on the lookout for? So, the one things that I'm holding both the group and the individual, that I've got to make sure it's not one or the other. I'm hearing that when conflict comes, to facilitate the conflict or the discussion around the prejudices, not to shy away from that as a group facilitator. I'm hearing to allow group leaders to emerge and to take that accountability, but also to be held accountable in the group. Um, so yeah, maybe there's one or two others you want to add from our discussion. What does that mean as the group facilitator? Should I do to ensure Ubuntu is facilitated?
Coming back to, I almost sound like a broken record over these last three um, episodes, but I think what it comes back down to again is maintaining the harmony, maintaining and again here, harmony doesn't mean everything is okay, we're all singing Kumbaya, but it's when the group wants to disintegrate to keep the group. So,
Cohesion.
coming back again, cohesion, cohesion, cohesion.
Yeah.
Um, and to facilitate that, I almost want to say is if you facilitate cohesion, even the hardiest of hard groups will eventually reach where they need to go. And to be okay with that is sometimes a group um, needs to move one step from forming to storming, right? And to be okay with that. You might never get to performing, and that is okay because
Yeah.
the group is going where the group needs to go with
Yes.
the capacity that the group has, with the trust that the group has. So I think again, cohesion, cohesion, cohesion. Um,
And
s-
that's
uh,
a very practical thing as a group facilitator. People can
very.
keep foremost in mind, and with the activities you choose and the warm-ups, and to, that cohesion, 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 yeah, becomes so important.
And then the second thing is allowing for human dignity. So I think
Yeah.
what is very important is never allow a group to finish with I almost want to say a conflicted spirit, where people are dehumanized. I think it's okay to have closing statements at the end of a group. We don't all need to leave the group again being kumbaya and happy and all that, but it is important to leave the group with dignity. What did you say? Okay, we can't just leave it from the one side. We have to hear from the other side.
Yeah.
So, bringing in the 30-second rule, I don't know if
Yeah.
our viewers know about this, but 30-second rule is when at the end of a group there's a conflict and you can't help but finish the group, each person has 30 seconds to say their closing statements or their remarks to each other, but to do that in a very humane way, finish the group, bring it all together, and then in the next session, if there's still something that needs to be resolved, you pick it up again. But again, end the group in a way that maintains the human dignity of all members,
Yeah.
because you don't want to leave a group in that space. It will
Yeah.
be detrimental to the cohesion. So cohesion, always maintain dignity. And then I think also don't steer the group in the sense of don't be so rigid in your thoughts that you push the group in a certain way. They will disengage, they will leave you in a certain sense.
Yeah.
Um, Even if they can't
Either
physically.
literally not coming back to
Yeah,
the group or checking out, like, I'm present, but I'm not here and I'm not going to give anything of myself. I'm withholding, withdrawing.
exactly. Exactly. And you'll find that more and more members do that, the more and more controlling you become,
Yeah.
where at the end of the day, you're actually not facilitating anything therapeutic anymore. And I think this is where we need to take a step back and be okay with the fact of not being in control. And I hate to say it, but I think a lot of those in the therapeutic professions tend to be people who love control. And it in this sense, with these groups, you can't be 100% in control. It's not your group, it is your client's group. And
Yeah.
to constantly remind yourself of this as you go through the process. It's not my group, it is their group. They will go where they need to go, they will do what they need to do. You're just there to allow the activity. You're there to bring activities for what they want. I mean, at the
Exactly.
performing at the performing stage, they tell you
Exactly.
tomorrow we want to do a
Yeah.
group on grief, and you need to bring the activity, and you have no
Yeah.
control, but you facilitate by bringing the activity, facilitating the discussion. And I think that's, once you've actually been to the performing stage of a group,
Yeah.
you see the power of group therapy, and it somehow just goes, aha, that's it. I'm not facilitate I'm at the end of the day, you're almost not facilitating, you're just providing a space, you're providing the activities, and the rest of the
Exactly.
people are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, maybe that's a good place for us to end there. You really are a believer. Once you've seen a group go to performing, you realize you're actually not needed. You've done your job. You can move on, and the group can move on. So maybe that's a
Absolutely.
good place to stop. So in the coming week, maybe I'd like to invite our viewers or people that are participating to maybe choose one of the elements that we spoke about, facilitating Ubuntu, making sure of human dignity, cohesion, a lot of those things we've mentioned, and pop in the comment below which is the one that you struggle with the most. And maybe that's the invitation for you in this coming week to focus on it and try and implement so that you can facilitate this philosophy of the individual grows as the group gathers. And we'll see you for our last episode next week. In the meantime, thanks, Michael, for joining us, and see you
It's always a
next week.
pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Happy facilitation, everyone.